everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have some wonderful guests here joining us, and today we're really going to be talking about something that's important to the SMA community, and we're going to be discussing the multiple technology appraisal. And I think a really great way to start this is by doing a round of introductions. So for myself, I am Louis. I am the community services lead here at SMA UK, and Portia, if I could ask you to go next, please.
Sure, thanks, Louis. Hi, yes, I'm Portia Thorman. I'm Advocacy Lead at SMA UK.
Andy, would you like to go next?
Sorry, yeah. Andy Thornton, trustee at Treat SMA, and have been heavily involved in the Risdiplam appraisals up until now, and have also been on Risdiplam since December 2020.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least, Rob?
Thanks, Hyrule. I'm Rob Burley. I'm Director of Care Campaigns and Support at Muscular Dystrophy UK. So I'm involved in a fair amount of appraisal work by NICE across all the 60 plus conditions we cover. There are quite a few treatment appraisals going through. I was around MDUK working with SMA UK and Treat SMA on the original appraisal of both Spinraza and Risdiplam.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So I guess the first question I want to pose to the group is, the SMA community already has access to Risdiplam and Spinraza. So why is NICE reviewing access in 2024?
I can take that one, Louis. So yes, you're right. My son accessed Spinraza way back in 2017, and that's when it was on an expanded access program. And then NICE, which stands for the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence, they approved nusinersen for funding in July 2019 and for Risdiplam in August 2020. Now, this was only on the condition that researchers could collect more information from patients and their clinicians about how well it works, how safe it is, and whether it's good value for money, really. That's because at that time, the NICE committee didn't think there was enough evidence from the clinical trials that had been going on to answer all those questions properly. So SMA, obviously, it's a rare disease. That means the numbers of participants in the trials weren't big enough to sort of satisfy a final decision. And that's why both the treatments have been funded, but via a really time-limited managed access agreement. You might have heard of it, an MAA, and they come to an end this year. So that's also why, if you've been prescribed either Risdiplam or Spinraza, you will have been asked to complete all these physio assessments, you would have been answering questions and hopefully completed patient-reported outcomes known as PROMs. So that's why we're having to look at it again. Now all that evidence has been collected and assessed.
Thank you. I mean, this is stuff that I've lived and breathed for a long time now. I've been on Risdiplam for a year and a half. So it really means something, right? And I think my next question I'll pose to Rob. How is this review actually being done?
Yeah, thanks. So when NICE looks at a treatment or treatments, they call it an appraisal. So you're going to hear this language a lot over the next sort of year. It's just a treatment appraisal. And then at the end, they'll make a recommendation as to whether the treatment or treatments should be funded by the NHS and made available permanently, following on from the MAAs in this case. NICE has a number of different routes that it can use. And in this case, Risdiplam and Spinraza are being appraised together through what's called a multi-technology appraisal, or an MTA. So again, you might hear that jargon a fair bit over the next year. The other two routes that are kind of more familiar are an STA, which is a single technology appraisal, or an HST, a highly specialized technology, or an HTA perhaps. So in this case, the two treatments are being appraised together. That's not unheard of, but it is quite rare, but it's something NICE are doing a bit more. And I think they started to use this process more during COVID, actually, as treatments came through quite quickly. So it's partly to help speed up the appraisal process. And in this case, Portia mentioned the MAAs. they adjusted the MAA dates to make sure they could be appraised together. So there was an adjustment a year or so ago to ensure that they could reach this point where they had enough data on both treatments to be able to hold the appraisals together. I think a really important point to note is that it being an MTA or a multi-technology appraisal doesn't mean these two treatments are going head-to-head. So the one outcome of sort of NICE are not trying to say one should be made available over the other. There's an outcome which I think we would potentially hope for is that both treatments are approved for use. So actually this is more about just appraising them together, not against each other. So as part of the process, NICE will look at all the evidence that's been collected while the MAAs have been in place. They'll also look back at existing and new clinical trial evidence. They'll look at international studies and also real-world data as well, so kind of real-world impact of the treatments. Really importantly, why we're sort of gathered together, they'll also invite groups that have contact with or are part of the SMA community to submit evidence and then also give their views on specific questions they're looking to answer. So there's a committee meeting later in the year, and in a second we've got a slide, I think, with the timeline up, where all of the evidence has been submitted is essentially discussed for half a day, and the committee starts to really probe in detail into one or two sort of key areas. To confirm that this is the NICE process covers England, Wales and Northern Ireland have mechanisms in place that generally follow NICE guidance, but there's a separate process in Scotland which is run by something called the Scottish Medicines Consortium. So yeah, you can see that the timeline now where we're in the kind of the early bits. You can see kind of week 0 happened in January, right on the left hand side there, in terms of going out to the community and saying they're going to have the appraisal. I think the committee for this appraisal is October, later this year in October. So SMA UK, Muscular Dystrophy UK and Treat SMA, we're consultees to the appraisal. So we've had the opportunity to contribute already into the process in a number of different ways. And the companies that produce the two treatments, as well as clinicians and other experts, have also had a chance to feed in. So in October last year, all 3 patient groups looked at the background information that was provided to everybody who's classed as a stakeholder, and we helped ensure that it was correct and detailed enough to gather the community's perspective and from the community's perspective. And then in January of this year, they launched the sort of consultation exercise of gathering people's views. And the committee in particular, the NICE committee, are looking for really sort of detailed information to help them understand what it's like to live with SMA. How does it affect the wider family? So they took the support network around someone living with SMA, and what difference have the treatments made to people's lives? How do they compare to what NICE call sort of best standard care? A group that has a key role to support the NICE committee in making the decision is something called the Expert Advisory Group, and this is a group also called an external assessment group. Often NICE change the name of things halfway through, or people use incorrect terminology. But essentially, this is an independent group that provides an analysis of all the evidence that's been put forward, primarily by the companies, and guides the committee on kind of areas where the evidence may be less strong or more strong, very robust. In this case, the University of Warwick are leading that project, but a number of bodies across England and the UK play that function depending on the treatment. So yeah, that in a nutshell is kind of what the process is and how it will move forward.
Thank you. And I guess I think this would be a really important part to ask a question around the evidence that's being collected. And Portia, how is this being done, and where is this evidence actually coming from?
So yeah, it's a lot of evidence, and it's our job as the patient organisations to bring evidence to the committee that they won't have seen from the clinicians or from the pharmaceutical companies in the clinical trials. They'll have lots of data from clinical trials and from the tests that the people living with SMA have been doing, like the Hammersmith, the CHOP-INTEND. I'm not sure which tests you guys do as adults living with SMA, but I know they're pretty rigorous. But we all know that these clinical tests in a hospital environment don't really reflect the actual differences the treatments made to our lives. I mean, for families like mine, it's quite clear cut because my son basically wouldn't be alive without Spinraza. But for adults living with SMA, like you, Louis, and Andy, it's important that we get across how important small gains are, how important stability is, and things like stability for NICE, when that's turned into numbers and data, it could be seen as a negative. Would you agree, Andy?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we have. It's remembering that SMA is obviously a progressive condition, and the science tells us that people are going to progress with the condition, and we need to try and convince NICE that actually a baseline of stability is actually a benefit. Because if I use me as an example, I've been on Risdiplam now for 3.5 years. I can be pretty sure that in that 3.5 years, I would have lost functionality without treatment, and probably would be unable to hold down the level of the job that I have at the moment, which is quite senior in the NHS. So, it's trying to convince NICE that even the simplest or the most minute of benefits can make an absolutely life-changing impact on people. And, being able to use a mouse, being able to use one finger to be able to move a mouse, or being able to move your head so you can use eye gaze technology, all of those kind of things are so important. And unfortunately, when you go to a hospital and you're asked to, pick up a weight, which you're never going to do on your day-to-day basis, or, you're asked to reach out for something, it doesn't really get across the real everyday picture and the real impact that SMA has. And that's what we've really got to try and do. And I think we're going to need people's help with that, because it's a very individual perspective. And the NICE appraisal is a very cold process. It talks about what are the benefits. The whole principle behind it is, can the NHS afford to provide this? Is it financially viable to provide this? And that's a very cold question when you're looking at people's lives and the impacts. It's really important that as we go through the next 9-10 months, that we get people's engagement in terms of them telling us what treatment has had an impact on them that perhaps hasn't been measured in all of these chop scales and all of the other stuff they measure.
Thank you, Andy. I can totally relate to those experiences of yours, and I couldn't agree more. I think that there is a lot that those tests don't articulate from our behalf in terms of the impact and the benefit that we're getting from treatment. So I guess the next question is around, there are 2 different treatments prescribed to children and adults across the whole spectrum of SMA, and that's a lot of perspective in terms of data that needs to be collected and to share. So how do you think we can achieve this, Andy? How do you think we're going to get across the finish line?
So the first thing is that we have to nominate, in quotes, patient experts to try and articulate what it is that we want to get across to NICE and the rest of the panel. So it's quite a daunting process. The meetings and that process is actually quite complex. We have nominated, as things stand at the moment, myself, Portia, Janadi from Treat SMA, and Lucy Frost, also from Treat. The reason being is that we all have experience, and then obviously Portia has been nominated from SMA UK. As you know, SMA UK is the largest patient advocacy organisation for SMA out of us all. And I think the reason we've picked those groups is obviously Portia has experience with type 1. G had a lot of experience with Spinraza in the original appraisal. I've been heavily involved in the Risdiplam discussions since the EAP, which then turned into the MAA. It's also quite handy having a bit of background in the NHS as well. You can kind of understand both sides of the picture. And obviously Lucy also has a son with SMA who is also receiving Risdiplam. So I think we cover a lot of different communities within the people that we have nominated. And because we all work in an advocacy role within SMA charities, it means that we are regularly talking to the community, we are regularly engaging. So it puts us in a good position to be able to understand some of the challenges and what we just talked about around what is a perceived benefit to one is not necessarily a perceived benefit to others. Is exactly what we're trying to focus on. Mm-hmm. And even us, as again in quotes experts, we are going to require input from everybody. It's really, really important that I can sit here and talk about my perspective, but my position will be very different to others. And a lot of some people have had very negative experiences with treatment, be it Spinraza through the intrathecal injections or Risdiplam. I know some people have suffered from some issues, some gastro issues. But the vast majority of people have benefited in some way, even if that means that they are stable. We all knew that we weren't all going to suddenly turn into the Incredible Hulk. But I think, we need to try and get across from as many people as possible. And we hope to collect that data from you guys through surveys and other methods over the next couple of months that we can feed that into the overall appraisal documentation.
Thank you. I guess you slightly touched on my next question around how do we actually do this? And we know that people living with SMA, not all medias work for each of us. So we all have different ways of how we want to do things. So I guess this is a question to all three of you, but I think I'll start with you again, Andy. How can we make this as streamlined as possible to get people's participation and engagement on this process?
So I think our role right now is to make sure the community at home know about what's going on, what's happening. There is this tendency for people to think these treatments have already been approved and been on it for 3.5 years. It would be very easy for me to just think, oh, well, that's it, it's done, I'm going to carry on getting it. But the reality is that isn't the case. So the first thing is, or the main thing is for us to tell everybody that actually it's almost like going back to where we were 3 or 4 years ago. We now need to go through that same process again. And the input and the importance is just as much as it was 3 or 4 years ago. There is no guarantee that these treatments are going to be around after the appraisal. And ultimately, it comes down to the amount of effort that we make that's going to determine whether or not these treatments are available. I think once we've got that message out, we want people to come to us and tell us how they want to engage with us. It can be a video, it can be audio, it could be emails. We will take whatever people are happy to provide. And we will then turn that into something that can be presented to NICE and the panel at the appropriate time. We don't want to exclude anybody. We want to make sure that we get as much feedback as possible. And people need to not worry about the how. Let us worry about the how. We just need them to do whatever it is that they feel comfortable with. And let us make sure that we get it to the right people to get across the right message.
Thank you. Portia, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, for sure. So I've just started the process of writing a survey, and I'll be doing that with Treat and with MDUK, producing a survey that's really tailored to answer the specific questions that NICE are asking us. So that survey hopefully will be finished by the end of February, and will go out to the whole SMA community. And we'd love every single one of you to answer it that are prescribed Risdiplam or Spinraza. We really want to see access for all. We want to see people continuing to have a choice, 3 treatments for SMA, and we think that's really important because there's not any one treatment that fits all. And I think that choice is the most important thing we can do. Even for the type 4s who currently don't get access to any treatment, we will be advocating for access to type 4s as well. So if there's anybody living with type 4 out there, your input would be really appreciated, even though you're not currently receiving treatment. Any case studies from you would be fantastic. So yeah, I'm looking for more detailed individual case studies that I can use quotes from in our submission. That would be really helpful. Everyone to answer the survey. And we would also love to be able to put together a video of many voices. So I am asking people to make me a really short 5 to 10 second video clip just saying, what has treatment done for you? And then we can link all those videos together and put a link to it in our submission and hope that NICE will watch it. There's no guarantee that they will watch videos, but we can only do what we could do. So I was wondering if, Louis, you could give me a little example. If I said to you, can you in 5 to 10 seconds tell me what treatment with Risdiplam has done for you? Putting you on the spot now. Go.
That's going to be really hard because I feel like I've had a very good experience with Risdiplam. But if I had to do it in 5 to 10 seconds, it would be Risdiplam has really changed the way I live my life. It means that I'm no longer as fatigued as I used to be or as quickly as I used to get fatigued. It means that I am able to take on a lot of roles in the disability advocacy space. And it also means that I'm not as susceptible to the annual chest infections that I'm used to getting because my breathing has improved. I've unfortunately picked up 10 kilograms because I'm actually eating properly, because I have the energy to do so. So all in all, it's just made a major difference in my life.
Okay, maybe I need to up that time limit.
Yeah, it's going to depend from person to person, I think.
Brilliant. And underneath this video, you'll be able to see details how to get those videos over to us. That would be really great.
Thank you. I think this approach is really important because you're allowing people to contribute in different ways. We know that there are some of us in the community that don't want to be center stage in the video. The survey will really come to life because it just will cover all bases, essentially. Rob, if I can come to you, in your role at MDUK, you've obviously had a lot of experience with these committees and other disease areas. So do you potentially have some top tips that can really contribute to this process?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, right. So we're just doing our planning for the year ahead, and Muscular Dystrophy UK will be involved in, at the moment, 7, and it may be more. So 7 appraisals just in the next financial year alone. So yeah, we're getting quite used to seeing NICE. I think the first thing I'll say is really reiterate Andy's point, our Portia's points around do please take part in the survey and share your views through video clips, etc. Because we have a really key responsibility. There are 3 patient groups now. So Muscular Dystrophy UK, SMA UK, and Treat SMA are the patient group stakeholders in the appraisal at the moment. It's a slightly strange process with NICE in that only in various stages can anyone as a member of the public take part. So actually coming sharing your views via us is really important, both to us, but also is the way that you can best do it. So please do take part in that. So other lessons that we sort of picked up along the way, I think, again, Portia touched on this right at the beginning. There's going to be a huge amount of evidence that the committee will be looking at, and very detailed evidence from trials and the MAA and data. So really a key learning point that we've picked up on the way is being really clear on kind of what the community evidence is that can add value. So don't try and repeat evidence that is already there or that is being collected through other sources. We're really there to tell stories on yours, Louis, and yours, Andy, in terms of the real world impact of the condition and indeed the treatments being appraised. So being really clear on kind of what evidence we can bring from the community will be really important. Linked very strongly to that is being really clear on what gaps there are in the evidence. So a key part of our role as patient groups will be talking throughout the process with not just NICE, but also with NHS England and also with the two companies to really kind of understand where they might feel that the evidence is slightly sort of less deep. So therefore we can, and is that something we can fill? So being really clear that actually if they need more insight on the real world impact of the treatment, that's exactly what we're here to help them understand. So being really clear on kind of what the gaps are that we're trying to fill. And I think that role of the patient groups can be really key also in terms of just fostering collaboration between all parties. So making sure that if further down the process there's a bit of a sticking point between NICE and the companies and NHS England, actually I was sort of positively leaning on them to unlock that problem and talk constructively and understand the difference that's being made. As you know, as you and Andy both said, unfortunately, SMA is a progressive condition, and the longer someone isn't accessing a treatment, the more the condition can progress. So it's really key that all parties understand the urgency of getting through any barriers that might sort of crop up along the way. And then the final lesson we've learned is that NICE struggle to quantify the impact of conditions and treatments on carers in particular. So there's often a sticking point where they talk about the health economics of the impact on carers, and they end up talking about looking at it through some case studies and sort of qualitatively rather than quantitatively. So not looking at data per se. So that will be key for us, I think, as we move forward into the process, is really trying to focus in on not just the people living with SMA, but their carers and the loved ones around them, and the impact it has on them, and the positive impact of having a loved one responding well to a treatment that's available.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I think we've talked a lot about what we need to do in order to get to where we need to be and hopefully get the outcome that we all obviously want to achieve, right? But Portia, coming to you, with what we have already, do you think that's going to be enough to get this over the line, or is what's missing?
I think we, as patient groups, already know a lot of the answers to the questions that NICE are asking us. I mean, the first question on the form is, what is it like living with SMA? Obviously, we all know what it's like to live with SMA, but each person's experience is different. So I would be really beneficial for me to read case studies and put that on top of my own experiences and the experiences I've learned from our outreach team, for example, who have, our outreach team have had 10 years of experience on the phone talking to people with SMA. So it can help me out, and we can work as a team to be able to answer that question really, really in full. We know we're going to advocate that all those who have SMA type 1, 2, or 3 should be able to have access to whichever treatment they choose and whichever treatment their clinician think is the best for them. And I talked about type 4 as well, extending access to that. Because although there's no clinical trial evidence of it being used in type 4, and that is probably what NICE will say if there's no clinical trial evidence then. But the fact is, Risdiplam's license, it is licensed for 5q SMA. And we will argue that type 4 comes within that bracket. We will all come together using our own personal experience, the experience of the people who work within our organisations, and the evidence that we gather from the community from this point forward. And I think, we will do our very best for the community to get this over the line.
Thank you. And Andy, if I can come back to you, when does all this work have to be done by, and when will we know the outcome of this whole process?
If you can indulge me for just 1 minute to go back to the previous topic, I cannot agree with both Rob and Portia more. I think what people need to be thinking about is the wider picture of how SMA impacts them. And I often, I have my own soapbox with the ramp moment. And, you know, if I think about me personally, so if I had received treatment and I'd had to give up my job because I could no longer use a mouse, I am the sole earner in my family, which means that we would lose most of our household income, which potentially would mean we wouldn't be able to keep the house that we've got now, which potentially means that we might have to go into some form of social housing arrangement. And with that comes stress and impacts on mental health and stress and all of that. And I think that's what we need to try and remember when we're thinking about the impact on all of these things. We need to think bigger in terms of where all of the different touch points are. It's very easy to think, all right, I'm not going to get treatment, I'm going to get worse. But what does that look like? It's the same as the benefit scenario. You know, who defines what a benefit is? Well, it's for us to define also what the opposite of benefit is negative is. And I think it's really important that when people are talking to us and communicating to us in whatever means they choose, video, email, survey, carrier pigeon, whatever, that, you know, that they get these points across to us. Don't assume we know all of these things. It's really, really critical. And I think the wider you can think, the better. So I just wanted to put that out there as an example, because I think it's a good example of thinking about the bigger ramifications behind some of the negatives. And that's one of the things we want to try and get across to NICE when it comes to arguing that stability actually is a significant benefit if you take into account everything that I've just said. We have to submit out all of our evidence in April, and that evidence is then reviewed, and we have the actual meeting, I think it is on the appraisal committee in October. That is where NICE get the opportunity, along with NHS England and other parties around, as well as the pharmaceutical companies. They get to challenge us on the information that we've provided. They challenge the pharmaceutical companies on the evidence that they provided, the cost benefits, all of those kind of things. I think just to re-emphasize something that Rob said earlier is that, you know, both of these are being reviewed together, both Spinraza and Risdiplam. They are not being reviewed against each other. They are very much, this is a process that is not pitching Risdiplam against Spinraza. It is looking at them both independently, but it's because the way they work is scientifically and technically very similar. It makes sense for the same group of people to review both. So rather than having two separate committees talking about the same condition with the same science and the same cost effectiveness and everything else, that's why it's being done together. So once we've had all of those discussions, NICE have, I think it's 3 weeks, to come back to us with a draft proposal. That comes out to all of the people that are part of the consultation. So that will include the patient advocacy groups, the companies. We have the opportunity to comment on that, and if necessary, there will be an additional meeting to discuss any subsequent changes, although that is quite rare. we have about 20 days to submit our comments on that. And then assuming that there are no changes and there are no appeals process submitted against the final guidance, the guidance gets published about 16 weeks, or the NHS is under an obligation to deliver on that final guidance in 16 weeks. Now, obviously, we're in a bit of a different position because the NHS are already technically delivering on the guidance. So it's unlikely that element will be a massive shift. But yeah, that's basically how it works.
Thank you. Rob, if I can come to you, and this is in part a bit of a selfish question, what happens to my treatment if NICE don't recommend the continuation of the NHS funding for this treatment? And I guess in part as a whole, what does that actually mean for SMA community if both are not recommended as continuous treatment for us?
So I think what's been positive in recent years is that the NICE process has got a bit better at being clear on this from the outset. And I think as more treatments are being appraised that people have accessed already, either through early access schemes or through the managed access agreements, there's more of an awareness that this will be a kind of common situation and a very common question. So for Risdiplam, the MAA guidance clearly states that if at this appraisal stage NICE publish negative final guidance or recommendations, so therefore say no, it shouldn't be made available, then existing patients may continue to receive the treatment until they and their treating clinician consider it appropriate to stop. So that's really important. So with the Risdiplam, treatment would continue if you're already on the treatment. As for Spinraza, we've asked NICE to clarify that point because it's not quite as explicit in the MAA guidance. They're seeking guidance from NHS England, and we'll let the community know as soon as we get a response. That'll be really important to clarify. Over the past year, we've been involved in a couple of appraisals for treatments for different conditions where there has been initially been negative guidance or no, and in those guidance, I've always made it very clear right at the outset that this guidance is intended for patients not currently on a treatment. So we'd hope that will be made clear ASAP. One of our roles is to push NICE for clear comms on key issues, and this is clearly one of them. And really helpfully, NICE have agreed and offered to create an FAQ, so a frequently asked questions document that we can publish as the patient groups, and that'll be quite a dynamic document. And I think one we can add questions to and keep talking to NICE about as questions come up. And I'm sure actually as part of the survey, a consultation exercise that we do as 3 patient groups, we'll start to see some themes of questions come up. So through that process, we'll identify questions, but you can also just send them straight to the organisation. So you can send them to SMA UK. It's pretty easy to coordinate. So office@SMA UK. In fact, I don't know the ending of the address. Can you step in so I don't get that wrong? I don't want to give people .com or .org.
Yeah, it's .org. We'll put all the details underneath the video so everybody knows where to go.
Brilliant.
Where to send Bobs.
Oh.
Thank you. Sorry, Rob, you're going to...
No, I was just going to say, our key role for us is keeping that dialogue going with NICE, and also asking, if and when appropriate, asking the companies as well and NHS England for clear communication and clear information where we think they have a duty to be showing that or a role to clarify things that the community are asking for.
Mm-hmm. Thank you again for all of your time today and coming to share this with us. I think it's really important to focus on the positive aspect of this conversation. I know that for many in the community, it's going to be quite daunting hearing this, and they might immediately jump into that mindset of, okay, our treatment is at risk here. And I think this is really the space where just one line from each of you that can really help motivate people to take part in this with you so that you're not doing it alone and so that we can give it the best shot possible. So if I can come to you, Portia, on the spot, one line, why should people help you with this?
Because we can't do it without you. We need everybody to come together so that we make the best, most detailed, to the point submission that we possibly can. So yeah, thank you to everybody that is going to take their time to help us out.
Andy?
And I have one line with lots of commas. I think for me, it's to the community. Do not assume this is a done deal. We had to fight very hard 4 years ago, and we need to do that again. We cannot assume or get complacent that this is a done deal. And I think it's very easy for people to get survey fatigue and think, oh, what's my one voice going to make a massive impact on something as serious as this or as significant as this. If everybody feels like that, then we have nothing to go with nice with. And therefore, as Portia said, we can't do it without the community. And please engage. And again, just don't assume this is a done deal. We have to fight.
Thank you. And again, last but not least, Rob, do you have one line that you'd like to share with everyone listening to this and to the wider community within SMA?
Yeah, I'll try these hyphens instead of commas, so can keep mine going as well. So I'd absolutely echo everything Portia and Andy just said. I think a key message: together we're stronger. So let's all take part in the process together and coordinate. Hyphen, and if at any point you're confused by the process or you're disheartened by what you're hearing, come to us, come to the three organisations, because we've been here before, and we can help explain where we are in the process, what's happening. One thing that's probably worth adding is that at various stages in the process, there was one stage after the first committee meeting is often a no, and that's because NICE say no in the hope that the companies will then look at filling some of the evidence gaps and come back, and then it becomes a yes. NICE are, I would say, proud of that, but they don't hide that fact. So a very high proportion of treatments get an initial no, and that becomes a yes. So not through an appeal that Andy spoke about, but just through the process of another look at the evidence. So therefore, if there is an initial no, please don't panic, because actually that's very common. And then our role is to help fill the gaps and steer it to a yes. We would hope so. Come to us if you're worried at any point, so that we can help explain where we are in the process and actually sort of translate what it means in NICE's language, which can be a bit difficult to grasp with if you're not fully used to the process.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of your time, and thank you so much for sharing this. I know that this conversation is going to be really valuable to our community, and I really look forward to staying in the loop and seeing how far we get with this.